Hello, welcome to the fourth webinar of the Gender Mainstreaming Blended course. The title of this webinar is Integrating Masculinities and Men in Gender Mainstreaming. Let's start explaining how this webinar works. We have a panelist presentation, and you will hear from the presenter, and you can put questions to be answered at the end of the presentation. We will compile them, and finally you will receive the responses. You will find your microphones are mute, so please remain mute the mics during the whole webinar. Please connect only to audio and not to video, as this might slow the connection for all the participants. We encourage you to type your questions at any point during the webinar, as I said before, using the chat function in the right side of the window, and all questions will be compiled and answered at the end of the presentation. So let's start the webinar, and allow me to give the floor to the moderator, who is Suzette Mitchell.
Thanks so much, Jorge. And I would like to introduce our presenter for tonight. We have Khamsavath Chanthavysouk, who is presently the Regional Gender Advisor for Asia with the International Rescue Committee. He's based in Kuala Lumpur, and he provides technical and strategic advice to enhance gender equality work programmatically and operationally for the IRC in Asia. Previously, he was the UN Women Training Center in Santo Domingo, working as the capacity development specialist. And prior to that, he worked for Partners for Prevention, which was a regional joint program on violence prevention in Bangkok as a capacity development analyst. And then when I first met him, he was with UNFPA in Hanoi as a gender program officer. So Kham has extensive experience over a decade, or over more than a decade, in working on violence prevention and response, and addressing harmful masculinities, promoting sexual reproductive health and violence, and movement building for social change and collective learning for activism. It's been an amazing journey watching Kham work as an Asian male in issues of gender, because I think one of the things I've really looked to Kham for in the last decade is a lot of leadership on gender from a male perspective. And I wanted to start the presentation by asking you, Kham, if you can just talk a little bit about the importance of addressing men and boys in gender issues.
Thank you, Suzette, for such an introduction, and I can say that you have been so supportive from right from the beginning on working on these gender issues. I've always been guided by your work, so it's great to be connected with you again. The importance of working with men and addressing harmful masculinity, I think we all agree that it's not such difficulty to answer this question, because gender is also about men and boys. It concerns men's life and experience. Men and boys are part of the problems and also we are part of the equations of inequality. Men and boys are also affected by some benefits from it and some affected by power imbalance as well. Because men's lives are very complex, because we don't have this one. And because we all this in the gender field, we all say that gender is relational, then one power dynamic shift one side of the story is not engaged. So we cannot shifting this power imbalance between men and women or between different groups of people without engaging all groups of people, including men and boys. So it's no doubt that it's very important, and decades of women's movements and women's rights work have shown that we need to engage men. We have to work with men to demand for actions from men and accountability for men in order to move this work forward. Suzette?
Yeah, can you also talk about the role of masculinities in the creation of gender norms?
Yes. So masculinity in narratives or discourses of manhood or maleness, it defies the ways men being men, and it gives men identity. So without masculinity, it's very difficult for men and for us to define what men is. So it's a whole narrative of being men. And in a patriarchal setting or the society that guided by patriarchy, masculinities are created and narrated and reinforced and mandated in such a way that men can have power over others, power over women, over animals, and over things. So within this setting, masculinities are always perceived as superior to femininity. And gender norms and practices and beliefs are used to maintain such power for men. It's how power is organized, right? So it's just a way that to maintain superiority. Um, so of course, masculinity it doesn't function solely based on gender norms, but they intersect with other power structures, for example, power, ethnicity, race, etc. So these norms, cultural norms, gender norms, and practices are set up, practiced, exercised, and reinforced so that we can maintain patriarchal masculinities. I'm keep using patriarchal masculinity, and I'm keep using that we are talking about patriarchal setting because there are positive forms of masculinity as well. But in general, if we are operating within a patriarchal system where men have more power over women, gender norms are set up to support superiority of men and to give more power to men. That's how I see the connection between masculinities and gender norms.
One of the issues that's come, sorry?
Yes.
One of the issues that has come up in some of the online discussions that we have is that people have asked a little bit about matriarchal societies and matrilineal societies. Do you feel that there are different types of masculinities in societies which are not as strongly patriarchal, or even those that are matriarchal?
Yeah, so for me, I don't think working on gender justice, and I try to refrain from using the word gender equality because we need to question the quality of equality. But in terms of justice for all genders, be it men or for women, any form of power imbalance is not just or it's not fair. So be it matriarchy or patriarchy, one group has power over another group. So that's not justice and that's not equality. So it's just a different sides of the coin. So it's the same harmful power over practice And masculinity in matriarchal society can be mirror of femininity in patriarchal society. So it is a change hands of power. So I don't think that would be something we are working toward. I hope not. I hope we don't looking for a system where we change hands of power, because that's how we see for democratic movement, right? That we move one dictator and we replace with another dictator. So I think for working to dismantle patriarchy, we do not want to put another group of people having power over another people based on their gender, because that's not fair, that's not just. So I think we need to transform masculinity and femininity in a way that they do not reinforce power imbalance of certain group, and that power can be shared. And then in an ideal scenario, when we achieve this big goal of gender equality and gender justice, we don't need to define masculinity and femininity anymore. We can just live in a world that we can just be us without dictating certain norms and certain practices to masculinity or femininity. We know that women can be strong and men can be strong. We know that men can be emotional and women can be emotional. So we don't have to define masculinity or femininity to certain practices. We are just fluid, and floating based on our human capacity and emotion.
Thanks so much. I think it's one of the things I was looking at online today was about a village in Kenya, which has created a village for only women. Now, these are women who've either been trafficked or have been abused sexually. And I think it's really interesting that the sign at the front of their village says that men are not welcome. Now, this obviously stems from systemic violence and trauma that these women have had. So I'm wondering if you could explain a little bit about the work that you've been doing on men's behaviour, especially as it relates to violence against women, and the importance of men working with men on masculinities and violence against women to prevent the situation where women are in such a dire state that they have actually developed this village on their own.
Yes, I mean, it's understandable, isn't it, that if you face such trauma and violence from certain group of people, it's understandable to just leave and don't have anything associated with these perpetrators anymore. And unfortunately, the world cannot be arranged in such a way, at least for now. So we still need to. We cannot live in this disaggregated society. But I say it's understandable, and I think it's if it's working for them for their safety, I think it's based on their experience and their trauma. But to your questions about working on violence, on this issue of violence against, and linked to your questions earlier about masculinity, violence is a tool to maintain superior masculinity. So it's used by men by women to maintain the power structure of men in general. Even though it's practiced by women, in many cases, is to maintain men's power. For example, FGM, the female genital mutilation or cutting. The perpetrators most of the times are women. The cutters are women. Involved peoples are women. But again, we have to question further that for what reason. And again, it still maintain controlling women's bodies for men. So violence into power, and we are talking about physical and non-physical violence. Used to control others, used to control women, is used to control children. It's a way to maintain power and hierarchy. So, of course, when we want to address violence against women, we need to work with men because many many cases men are perpetrators. Um, so we need to work from the side that caused the problem. Of course, it has to go alongside with services and responses to support victims and survivors. But at the same time, we also need to hold men accountable for their practices, and in the long run, to work with men to change these harmful practices and the social norm that condone and support violence. And using men to work with men is a tactful and strategic approach and realistic approach in many senses because, you know, realistically, men still listen to men more than listen. Men feel more comfortable engaging with men, and in many even more so in certain so, for example, when my previous work in Afghanistan, where there's such a disaggregation in association, we can only have men talking to men, or the ongoing discussions about men's locker room. Women cannot be inside men's locker room, so it's a strategic approach that men are used to talk to men, and it's an engagement approach. Lastly, it's also to show men that there are different ways of being men, and there are different masculine different practices of masculinity that can be example of an alternative. So that's why it's so both strategic and also uh, technical reason for having men working with men and boys. But I also think that there needs to be a point when working with men and boys. They have to listen to women's voices. There needs to be time and ways to engage men and women because, again, we say that gender is relational. Men cannot talk with men only because in our daily life we communicate and we interact with each other. And first-hand experience on gender inequality cannot be told on behalf of women. For example, if I'm working with men and boys, I bring this issue up to discuss with men, but at certain point they have to listen directly from women because women's voice have to be heard on this.
Fantastic, thanks. I'm also really interested in how that leads into the role of men as champions for gender equality, because I think in a lot of countries, I know where there are very dominant masculinities and also very high levels of violence in countries like Papua New Guinea, using men who actually have strong images of masculinity, but like sports stars, but having them come out as advocates for gender equality and the empowerment of women, talking about how things like being a real man is, not hitting a woman, is being a caring husband, being a caring father. How important, I to let others on the webinar know, Kham actually was one of the participants when we ran this course in Geneva earlier, and we had an armchair conversation with Kham because we had a number of men in that course, and we've got 13 men in this course, Kham. And one of the things that 13. So we're up to 30%. We've got a critical mass. So one of the things that we really want to do is encourage men to talk amongst themselves on how they can be champions, because I know as a woman working in gender, it gets tiring always being the one to bring up the gender issue, and it's fantastic when we hear men speaking up against on the issues, but also how you can choose high-profile men And I know that you have an issue on champions, but I was wondering if you could talk about the He for She campaign and how the role modeling of men, talking about the importance of men being caring fathers and partners and working towards gender equality.
Yeah, so very interesting points, and I would like to put it forward, especially to participants of the course, that I have a particular point of view that people might not share. And certainly, there are so many people in the world working on this issue, men and women, that might not share similar perspective with me, and there are people who share similar perspective with me. So again, this is part of my learning process. I cannot say proudly that this is, my strong point of view, but this is what my reflection is, what I'm going to share with you. It's just my personal reflection, is part of ongoing learning process on this work. So bear in mind. I have always been critical and more increasingly on the using of this word of male gender champion and champion, or male ambassadors or male advocates on gender issues. When we say gender issue is to promote the right of men and women, it's the right thing to do from many perspectives. There are many reasons to work on that, from economic reason, political reason, to moral reason. So for me to work on something that you're supposed to work, why we call you champion when many people have done it for such a long time and they are not called champion? If one man stand up today saying that I'm not going to hit my wife, and he becomes champion, and for me that's strange, because you're not supposed to hit your wife, and suddenly you said you are not going to do that, and you are praised by the whole world. So I'm personally critical about that. However, having said that, programmatically and realistically, I think it's an approach. So from a practitioner point of view, we use this approach, what we call a positivist approach, engaging approach, because we cannot blame or shame men, then it doesn't work. We cannot use the negative approach because that would push them away from engaging. So we need to be positively engaging with men and boys. And obviously, men and boys are gatekeepers. Many of them at the organizational level, in community, at the household level, politically, economically, they are holding power. They have to engage for change. Then in engaging them, we need to encourage, convince them, persuade them. And the approach is to be positive about it, to be celebratory about the engagement. Now, they have to see the benefit of joining this movement, and we need to continuously, hello, there's a noise, continuously negotiating and promoting this type of role model. Hello, I hear a lot of noises. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. So in terms of the approach, I think it's an interesting approach. It's good for younger men or for boys and for other men to see that men can practice masculinity differently. Because men listen to men and men look up to the role models. If we have these sport men, if we have these very masculine men, I don't know, some good-looking men, male politicians, men in power, to show the new way of being men, I think men would be encouraged and men would listen to them. But for us, we always have to be careful about selecting men to say that, because we need to know that they are really supporting the cause. Because we have had in my previous experience, we have had some incidents or cases that we engage with either sportmen or male politician. In fact, in one country I cannot name, a minister signed up to be in the male champion, etc. And later on, he the news came out that he beat his own wife. So we need to be able to find the right men to do the job. And again, and we need to be critical about how these men in different aspect of their life also support certain ways of harmful masculinity. Let's say if a sportman stand up and say that he's supporting the work on ending violence, but he is very violent in the sport field, or he make sexist comments toward a sport female colleagues or female reporters. So we need to be careful about that. And lastly, I think we need to be more honest and realistic about what exactly these engaging men, uh, uh, what exactly result we get from this, or the positivist approach by having men joining a campaign, having men signing up for certain cards, or wearing a certain ribbons, or wearing a certain T-shirts, or wearing an orange T-shirt on 25th of November, sing some songs. What exactly it leads to? Are they actually changing? Do we have evidence from programmatic work that show that this type of work actually change social norms and pushing the boundary? I think it's important. We need to engage men. It needs to be done. However, we have to dig deeper, and we have to pair that with a more thorough intervention, and also programmatic intervention to continue pushing the boundary. Because signing up a campaign, it's not enough, and we know it's not enough. I sign up for a campaign to protect the animal. Doesn't mean that I would do something to save animal. If I'm signing up to protect the earth, it doesn't mean that I would change my behavior to be more green or clean. So the same thing, if men sign up to support women's right or to end violence, it doesn't mean that the gender practice will change. So we need to do something more. We cannot be complacent with this very minimalistic and superficial approach. We need to do more than that. It's important, it's needed, but it's far from sufficient.
Fantastic. It's a great dialogue. Thank you so much for sharing that on a personal level. And I'm going to ask you to continue to share on a personal level. Sorry, Kham. But I'm really interested if you could talk, because we do have a lot of men in the course, and I think it would be very interesting for them to hear about the benefits as well as the difficulties for you as a man being a gender advocate. What have been the highlights and the challenges?
The highlights, so benefits at the personal level, in my private life or personal life, I think it's much easier now it's much more comfortable for me to be myself, because I don't need to so much adhere to these masculine norms, right? I am still, because I'm still part of this society and patriarchal society, I still hold myself to certain masculine practice. But it has been a liberation of just being myself at the personal level. I can be emotional if I am, because that's okay, or I can be vulnerable. It's okay, because I understand that there's some they are not linked to my identity or to who I am. And of course, I can engage with broader groups of people. I can have friends. I can have a more open relationship, especially with women and girls, because I don't have these boundaries. Uh, the relationship with men, I'll talk about the disadvantages. Professionally, it has been a very good learning experience. Suzette, you have seen me over a decade now since Vietnam. It has been a very good learning experience. I'm still struggling all the time. There is a good learning curve. It's a back and forth, and there's so much work to be done, and on this issue. And programmatically, when we are work on development, on humanitarian responses, um, we see changes in people's life if gender equality is improved. We see concrete results if women's and girls' lives are improved and men's and boys' lives are improved. So, there are concrete rewarding result that we can look forward to, and we know that it can work. It's not something mystery. It's something that workable. It is something that we can change. So professionally, it has been rewarding. There's a lot to be done, but there are so many practices and promises that we can look for. Personally, I think it's been a good learning personal development process. Now, the negative part, as a man, and I'm telling men certainly that we have many things to lose, really, working on gender equality and justice. And let's be fair, we have had enjoyed so much of male privilege, and we will lose a lot because that's reality. I cannot lie that on the way on this process of achieving gender justice, we will not lose at all, and everybody would be happy. The fact that if I go home and then I enjoy so much support from my sisters and I start to do the cooking and cleaning, I don't want to do it, but if I want to live on my principles and value, I have to do it. And it's more work for me, and we have enjoyed that. And the simple as that, you know, the, the promotions of women in politics, women in workforce, men have to compete with that. We have enjoyed that. So we, we have hold power for so long, we will lose it. And we need to lose it for everybody to have a better life. So that's the overall disadvantage. But I hope in a certain period of time, and when achieve the justice and equality, we will be equal, and we should all enjoy our rights fully. At the personal level, professionally, I think as a man working on this issue, you know, I I have I have felt and or have experienced that I'm not regarded as highly as other sectors because it's still considered as a soft sector. I'm not as equally reputable or competent or perceived as competent as economists or I don't know or scientists or um, doctors or people or other sectors in our own development field. People who work on economic development, on health issues, on reproductive health. They always perceive that gender is a soft issues and men working on soft issues are not competent men, are not qualified men, or even some certain are not men, are not quote unquote real men. That's why you work on this issue. So it's an ongoing battle personally and professionally. Um, and you always I always seems to be on the other side of the story, and you cannot fully engage with men when you always question men practices and masculinities. So you can, as a man, you can be excluded a little bit. And also in the patriarchal world, people are bullied for doing something differently. So can it might not be explicit, it might be implicit in terms of bullying you experience at the workplace for doing the work that people don't believe in. At the personal level, I talked earlier about, being in the men locker room or engage with men, because, I myself try to transform harmful masculine practices and to be men differently. And, I also suffer consequences from that because men can exclude me, men can see me as less man, and it's very hard to engage with certain type of practices. I don't want to be in the locker room. I have no interest in the locker room. I don't want to talk about the certain things that some men talk about. But and again, that means I'm also excluded from that group. I'm also find it challenging to engage with that group. So if I don't play sport, it's hard for me to engage with men who play sport, and it's hard for me to convince men who play sport to think about gender issues. So there are different disadvantages at the personal level as well.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for such an astute personal reflection. I think it really brings forward how complicated and complex these issues are, and I think we have to, as you said, dig much deeper than just say we bring men on board and we want them to wear a ribbon. We need to work with men in a way that we understand the context that they're in when they work with other men as well. I have a question here which has come from Oyuntia from Mongolia, and they're asking, how should training on gender be organized if the audience is men only, especially at a management level? They say that they've been asked for separate meetings for men and women in the same organization, and for separate training. What should be different from regular gender awareness training, and how do you make it interesting and engaging for men?
Thank you for the questions. It's difficult, isn't it, to work on gender issue with just specifically for men. I have tried two approaches just for men only. One is it's using power analysis in the training with men. So we don't start the training, or we don't work on men. We don't start working with men directly talking about gender. So from the beginning, we don't come in talking about gender or men and women and norms and practices, etc. We talked about inequalities and power imbalances because, Suzette was saying earlier, men's lives are complex and men are not homogeneous. There are men who have more power than other men, and there are men who have less power than other men based on different scenarios. If we put rich men and poor men together, rich men have more power than poor men, and masculinities are different there. If you have rural and urban, or educated or uneducated men, and you have bosses and supervisors in the room. So we all experience power inequality differently, and at some point of our lifetime, we always experience it, be it man or woman. So the discussion can start from this inequality based on our identity. I feel that I'm not equal because I'm from a rural area, and I feel that I'm not equal in certain contexts because I'm poor. I feel that I'm not equal because I am only a driver in an organization, or I'm only a deputy manager, or vice president. So from that discussion, it can be a foundation for understanding inequality. And after that, we can bring in gender aspect of inequality, what it means to experience inequality based on gender. And then the women's pictures can come in, that they also experience inequality based on their own gender. So for me, we wouldn't scare them off by talking about gender immediately at the beginning, but it's a slow process of introducing the issue. The second thing, it's a very short-term approach, but it's always work, especially with managers and in the organization. It's economic reasons. We bring this issue from economic perspective, and we need to have evidence to support that. That having gender inequality, how much it would cost the company or the organization for monetary term. If they are managers, if they are working for an organization to make profits, or if you are from a non-profit and you want to achieve your result, whatever they are, and we have to show that without gender inequality, without meaningful women's participation, you cannot get what you're supposed to get or you want to get. And from that argument, hopefully we can convince them. It's not enough, but it is a very strong, a strong argument. And there has been more evidence to show that. There has been more evidence, the current discussions about women in the .com, the computer or industry, what it means to exclude women, and what could they have earned more if we promote diversity. It's not only also about women, but it's also different diverse group of people that can bring diverse experience and diverse knowledge and skills, because the products from corporate points of view, products serve men and women. Or if we are from non-corporate or non-profit point of view, our beneficiaries and men and women. If in our workforce we don't have women and men equally, how do we understand our clients or our beneficiaries, right? So we use this economic argument to convince men in the training.
That's fantastic. That's a really excellent response. Thank you, Kham. I've got a question from Vesna in Tajikistan, and she's asked if you could please reflect on how to keep male advocates motivated for them to continue addressing inequality issues on their own initiative.
So we were talking earlier about showing men benefits and keep things interesting. I don't think it's only for men. No, it's for everybody to engage. We need to know what to get from here, the value of our engagement, of our time and resources in this, and how interesting or challenging it is. We need to feel uplifted or motivated every day, be it from personal point of view or professional point of view. In certain contexts, if you work in an organization, if you are a male advocate, you are gender advocate, you are being seen more. You might be considered more for different positions, for career development. That's very from career-driven perspective, but men can be interested in that. It might not be sufficient. It might be very superficial, but it's one of the reasons. Some people are more intellectual engaged, so if they feel that it's stimulating for them, or some people like to be praised, some people like to be rewarded. We need to find different interests and different needs. We call in the psychological field, we call psychological needs. People need different things. Some people engage in certain issues because they just want to be seen and famous. They always want the attention. Some people want to do something because they feel that it's very intellectually stimulating. Some people have some concrete reward financially or in terms of status quo. So we need to find out different needs or different interests that men have to engage with us. And of course, the broader perspective is that men understand that this is important. This is part of our commitment in promoting equality and right for all, and that the broader benefit that men have engaging in this, and the better quality of life that we all can have collectively together as men and women if we can achieve this together. So the bigger picture on equality.
Very good. And Vesna has also asked if you have experience of engaging men in rural areas, in very patriarchal and religious communities.
Yes, and in what 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 does it
If
mean? I mean,
yeah, if you could just talk about engaging men, any experience you've had of engaging men in rural areas, particularly with religious communities and very patriarchal contexts.
yeah. So I have, and I have done it. You know, in society in Vietnam, we used to work with farmers' unions and trade
Mm,
unions. So we went to the community to work with farmers' unions member at the very community level and different contexts. So you know, people have different beliefs and values and principles, even with and in different contexts. Religious people have values based on their religions. Uh, Certain groups of men at the rural area, they have certain practices based on their values. And I think it's important to understand their values and the guiding principle why they are doing what they are doing. Uh, and try to find out some aspect of that value that support your messages or our messages or support equality. Now, in general, in religious, for example, religious value, if we dig deep, if we consult a religious text or scriptures, you know, it's all about peace and security and happiness for all, right? So we need to be able to identify certain positive practices, their practices that we can encounter or we can use as argument with them. And again, it's a long process. It's very naive and I would say stupid to, especially for a foreigner. I'm a foreigner to go to a community and say this is are the things that you should believe in, and 2 hours workshop or 1 day workshop or even 1 week workshop and I wash my hand and I leave. I think it's an ongoing process and it always works better that it comes from within, cannot be imposed. We have learned through our history that social norms change from within and it's a long term process. So we need to find a way to set up such system or such dynamic for an ongoing dialogue within the community uh, to identify ways and their own steps to improve the situation and to enhance equality for all. It's an ongoing process. It needs time. It needs a deeper understanding of the context and the background and the values. And lastly, about being in a rural area or poverty, it's my experience. It is very difficult to talk to poor men about giving up their power when they feel that they don't have power. And this is reality, right? We cannot go to a very poor, rural, poor villages and say that you have to stop beating your wife when their priorities are not that. Their priority is to survive and to maintain their livelihood, you know. So we need to be able to find the way and help them to sustain their life because at the end it's about having better quality of life, men and women, right? So we cannot demand certain group of people to do things without understanding the context. So we cannot demand poor men to start doing something when they feel that they don't have any power. So I think it's an ongoing process and understanding the context, and we work from there. My question is that I don't think we have a straightforward ways to do it, but I think it takes a lot of time and understanding the context and help setting up a system where questions can be asked from within and their values and their value system can be questioned and can be used to promote gender equality from within.
Excellent. Thank you. That's perfect. Um, are there any other questions, George? Jorge, do you have any other questions from your end?
No, we have not received more questions.
Okay, we're getting to the end of the hour. I want to thank for an exceptional dialogue. It's been such a valuable opportunity to hear firsthand from a male gender specialist and the ways that the challenges that you have and also the particular context in which you're working. And as Kham said, over the last 10 years, he's constantly reflecting and learning. And I think that very mature approach of approaching the issues has been really clear throughout this presentation, and always coming back to this analysis of power and where people are at. And it's been incredibly valuable. So Kham, I really want to thank you for that.
Thank you so much, Susan, for this opportunity.
No, it's been great. I also just wanted to remind the participants that we will be meeting face-to-face in Bangkok on Monday morning at 8:30 in the Landmark Hotel. There is a logistics section on the website, on the it's a website, on the webinar section. There is it's the month anniversary of the death of the king. So there will be a lot of people wearing black throughout Thailand, and there has been a notification that people might want to wear dark colours. Unless you're actually going to the funeral, which none of us will be, it's not mandatory, and they do expect that tourists probably won't, but we do want to inform people that is the context. So you may want to pack some dark clothes. I also would really like everybody to bring a national gender policy with them. Now, I know some of you are not working in national contexts, so if you can choose the policy from the country in which you do the most work or is the most challenging, and some of you may come from countries which do not have a gender policy. In that case, don't worry. But please bring a hard copy of a gender policy, or it may be called Advancement of Women policy, or whatever the national policy that involves women and gender equality. And one last thing, one thing that was really lovely that we had at the last session is when people shared food and everybody bought food from their different countries. So I'm committing myself to bringing some food from Australia. So one of the really lovely things about the training is that we get to meet each other. And you'll meet Anna on Monday. She also was in the last course, and since that last course, she has really made so many linkages with the participants and is working with us on this one. So I really want to encourage the personal contacts that we can have as well, because as well as the content that you will get, it's the interaction that you will have with other people. So maybe we can share a little bit of that over food. So it's midnight here for me in Melbourne, and I think that's an hour. So come again.
Sorry,
thank
Suzette,
you.
we have received a last question from Besna.
Oh, okay. Just before you go, do you have experience in working with younger boys?
I have experience working with adolescents, not with boys, in the context of promoting sexual and reproductive health and rights. Previously, especially with UNFPA in Vietnam, and also in Bangkok around school-based curriculum to promote gender equality at school, stop bullying at school, stop bullying, sexual diversity, promoting sexual diversity at school. I have not worked on with boys who experience violence or who experience trauma. That in fact, not only boys but men. I have not really worked with that field. So again, I think it's also about building different norms for boys and adolescents period to understand what it means to be uh, gender equitable men, the way they relate themselves to their female peers, to build their communication and problem solving skills and knowledge, not based on violence but based on reasons and emotions, for them to understand their sexualities and reproductive health and practices, because that's the time that adolescents boys are forming up their identity, and the way that they engage, they understand themselves, their sexuality, their reproductive health, and their own relationship with girls, mothers and sisters, and the broader society. I think it's important, and again, it's an ongoing dialogue with them. I don't support any campaign at school 1 day, 2 days. There are so many promising practices that have put forward from ICRW, ICRW, or raising voices in Uganda, in India, in Bangladesh, about evidence based about working with boys at school, for them for 2 or 3 years, and how they have changed their behavior practices in a positive way. So there are a lot of evidence on that, and it's a very good approach, because that's when when boys forming up to be a man.
Fantastic. Really, really appreciate the insights that you've shared with us today, Kham. And I also want to thank Jorge and Dejan, who in Santo Domingo have gotten up very early. So thank to all of the three men who have contributed to the session on men and masculinities. Thank you so much, and look forward to meeting you all in Bangkok next week.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Kham.